Whoa, sorry about that there. Little technical difficulties. Sorry about that, Chris. You were just talking about the Stewart compound. My laptop decided to go on the fritz, but we're still here with you now. Let's talk a little bit about that Stewart compound. I myself played way too much hours on that particular layout. It was the outdoor track, the supercross track, which was actually I have a bone to pick with you because that was a very difficult supercross layout, if I do say so myself. But I do thank you for allowing there to be an option off of one of the berms so you could jump off of the one berm and actually land on top of what I guess would be James Stewart's garage. I spent some time up there as well.
Funny enough, actually, I spent some time on that rooftop too, and I'm not really a big heights guy. But at the end of the day, actually, we went up on top of the roof and we're just hanging out talking, which was pretty cool. You can climb up there from the railing, and
Really?
and that's where the idea came from of, well, we need to be able to jump up here and ride up here because, again, I'm a video game person myself. Like I like to do weird stuff like that, like I want the realist gameplay experience, but at the same point, if you give me a roller coaster or a ski ramp or something like that, I want to be able to try to ride on it, which is actually really difficult in the way that our tracks were built because they were a displacement map, which is just a black and white image. And so the terrain, like riding on physics and stuff, were way different than riding on objects, which, were created obviously 3D objects and stuff. So they were a bit of a challenge, but yeah, back to the Stewart compound. We finally get on an airplane, get down there, and James greets us. And I was a little nervous going in because, I mean, I'm a fan for one, and he's James freaking Stewart, and two, I didn't know, with how much he was into it, what it was going to be like working with him, and he was awesome immediately. He was just another moto dude, and it was super cool. As soon as we started going around the track and like talking about, he's talking about how he would, triple the bumps into the corners and stuff like that around his practice track. And we could talk moto lingo immediately. I think we both felt comfortable. And it was really neat, a really neat experience. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch him ride the track. He was battling injury, and I believe that was right when he was about to switch teams, I think. Maybe going over to Yamaha, or I can't recall exactly the time and place, but I know that there was
Okay.
kind of
I
some
think that might have been
uncertainty.
factory Yamaha to L&M or
Uh,
L&M to JGR.
on them to JGR, maybe I think, but I'm not quite certain on that. I don't recall. I just remember he wasn't riding. But then we did get to watch Malcolm ride a little bit, and it was actually before his Supercross debut, so it was from his early laps on Supercross. But I didn't get to see any of the James lines, and then it was pretty neat at the end of the day. And it's the only thing I kept when I left Rainbow Studios is actually I went and sat on the big tabletop in the middle and hand drew blueprints for the Supercross tracks and outdoor track. And maybe when this goes live, I will onto the podcast network. So I'll actually post those on my social media, and people can go look at them because I'm super proud of them, and they're really cool. And they're handwritten scribbles, but it was neat sitting in the dirt at Stewart's place, and I was just reflecting on the day that was of it. We also were filmed the whole time. He was doing Bubba's World at the time, and part of what we had arranged with our deal was that we were going to be featured in an episode of Bubba's World to promote the game. And unfortunately, that was one of the things that corporate, when they decided to upset Red Bull, got clipped. So it never came out and saw the light of day. But yeah, I mean, that project was really cool. So that was kind of phase one. And then phase two, I went back to Phoenix and obviously had to build the tracks and make them 3D. And then it was time for James to fly out, and he flew out for two reasons. One was to play his compound and basically give it a stamp of approval and make any changes he wanted, and then also to do the cut scenes that were recorded with the title. So phase two comes, and James comes, and he's sitting at my desk playing this track, and ultimately found out he's not very good at the game. So it ended up being him watching someone else play the track so that he could give feedback on it. But he was really pumped on it. He's like, wow, he didn't believe that we could make it as realistic as we did. But then he goes, there's only one problem. And I'm like, okay. And the Supercross track by the barn was the one where they were riding. I think it's the red one with the lights on it. And he's like, well, you're just going through here, tripling through this rhythm section. He's like, but I quad this and I quad that. And I quad that. And he's like, you can't do that. And I wanted to pick up my monitor and throw it out the freaking window because I'd literally spent weeks making those jumps so you couldn't quad them because I wanted it to ride like a real supercross track again. And so I'm working super hard to make it so you can't quad them, and to do it without, like, it's not easy because you have to just change the faces just every so slightly to make it so that they're not possible for him. Then he's sitting there telling me I could have avoided all that work because he was quadding them anyways, and to change it all back. So that was pretty funny just because, I mean, I'm looking at it as a normal person looks at a supercross track and like, no, they're going to go 3-3-3 through the rhythm. And for a normal person, that's what they would do. But this is James F. and Stewart, and he's a freaking quad god. So that was pretty neat. And then we went into the cutscenes, which was actually, it was a really different situation seeing James there. He was really uncomfortable on camera, just speaking into it and with lines and stuff. And so that was actually a good bit of a struggle. And if I could do it all over again, I probably would do things differently to not even put him in that situation, and figure out a different way to execute what we did. Oh, and then the other really cool thing about it when we were at his place was he goes, "What's it take to get on the cover of this thing?" And I was like, "You want to be on the cover of the game?" He's like, "Yeah, wouldn't that be sick?" He's like, he wanted to be bigger than motocross was part of the reason he was super excited about it. And he's
Of
like,
course.
all the celebrities, like the big people, they're on video game covers. And so
Tiger,
that was
yeah,
another one.
Madden.
When we call back to the marketing department, of course, they're all for it. They're like, heck yeah, we'll put him on the cover. Like, we didn't put you on the cover because we figured we'd have to pay an arm and a leg for you to be on the cover. And you're asking to do it? Heck yeah. So that was pretty neat that, he was actually really stoked because we were willing to do that for him, and we were stoked too. So that was pretty cool.
Certainly. And yeah, no, that was such an iconic time in the sport. It's this sort of just after the sort of economic downturn, but I think it was still for the most part good times all around as far as abundance within the industry and stuff like that. And to have a character like James, who, like, the fact that you were on hand for some of those, like, kind of those stand-ups where he's like, that was pretty cool. Just wait for you. What we have for you next. And like honestly, it didn't even sound that rehearsed or that scripted. Like he did a pretty good job like kind of being a little bit more off the cuff. I'm surprised to hear that he was nervous about it, but it was a little bit out of his comfort zone, I assume. But that's cool, man. I like that was a really cool game. I feel like that, like, honestly, to me, I still prefer Reflex over Alive, but they were both great titles that probably got more time played on them than a lot of the other titles that exist. I was curious if you guys as game developers ever went back and played older games that had certain features in them that you kind of brought forward, or say, like, how can we like put our own twist on something like this? Like I think of like the career mode with MX Superfly, which you start off as an amateur track, you go to Loretta's, you go to that other weird one that's at like somewhere like a quarry. And then you eventually get onto like the national tracks. Like, can you touch on any stuff like that?
For sure. We absolutely played every other game out there possible. Constantly would be going back looking for ideas. And I can promise you that the core moto group within the company wanted nothing more than a rookie to pro type realistic career. And unfortunately, it was something that just, it was really tough to get across and get them to let go. They wanted something different and out there. So, but we definitely 100% did. And I mean, a lot of that's what led to another piece that led to my demise with the company is I was playing MX Sim at the time. I'd gotten into it, and I literally had it on my computer, and I would bring our physics guys over and I'd say, look at this. I can do this in a game developed by one dude with no budget compared to what we have. And I want that feel, and you can't give it to me, and I was using it as an example quite often, to say the least, to try to get that accomplished. But yeah, it was a really misguided ship in certain spots. And I I agree that Alive was not nearly as good as Reflex. I actually, if it wasn't for the Stewart compound, I would have nothing really positive to say or take away from Alive. Unfortunately, my job as a game designer ended up being to create the microtransaction model of all of the DLC program and stuff. And I mean, it didn't sit right with me. I'm basically trying to figure out a way to take money out of our fans' pockets by giving them less. Just here, the stuff that you're used to getting for free. Now you're going to buy it. It was a really tough time for me, like I said, to go through all of that, and ultimately what led to me just saying, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm over it. I'm done. I need to find something different. And so one day on my way home from the office, I called my boss, my now boss, and he was my suspension guy my last year racing, and we've become friends. And he had moved out to Race Tech about a year prior. And so I knew he was in California, and he was like the one person I was probably closest with that was in the industry. And I said, if you hear of any jobs, just let me know. I'm interested. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't have any experience, but I probably would be pretty decent at, marketing, or I could do rider support, that side of things. But I was like, I just need an opportunity. And he gave me Paul Teed's number, the owner of Race Tech, and said, you need to call Paul. He's like, I think we're looking for a new marketing guy. Well, what I didn't know is Rob really was one making those decisions at that time. And he just needed Paul to say, okay, this guy doesn't completely suck, and I'll support hiring him. And I went in with zero marketing experience other than the cross promo stuff that I did to run the marketing department at Race Tech. And they had a resume I went out for my interview, and Paul slaps a resume in front of me on my desk and goes, this guy wants the job too. He wants 10 grand less a year from you, and he's been doing it for 10 years. Why should I hire you? And luckily I was very prepared, because I talked to Rob enough, just again being excited about it and making sure I wanted to do it. I had a thumb drive with me which had like a newsletter design, a new website design, like some ad stuff, like all this stuff that I was like, this is what I would create, this is what I would do differently than what you're doing. And I was like, can I pop this in your computer once? And I think right there Paul saw, oh wow, he wants this bad enough, he put in all this work without even having the job yet. Like they didn't ask for any of that stuff. Maybe he liked my ideas. And Paul hired me. He said, I understand you've never done this before. I'm paying you to come and learn and make mistakes. Just don't make them twice. So I had no idea what I was doing. I literally sit down, and I didn't realize I was the whole marketing department. There's no one to teach me anything. But we're 11 years later and I'm still there. I just had my review and they were very happy with me. I can tell you that I've made the company a good bit of money, and I work with a great group of people, and we've definitely changed the company considerably in that time, but I guess it's worked out okay.
Certainly has, my friend. Race Tech, privateer proven, revalves in a box, everything else in between. It's great to hear that you didn't totally suck, and that you were given that vote of confidence, and like that just sort of doubles down it's not always what you know, it's who you know, but also how you present yourself. There's a lot of people who might have say they knew that Rob guy, and they're like, oh, I got this in the bag, and they don't show up nearly as prepared as you did. So that really would have been the linchpin as to giving you the opportunity to at least try at it. And I'm a firm believer in basically any job can be learned. And then that's what I've literally done with the podcast is like I learned Photoshop, I learned podcasting, I learned like website hosting and all kinds and journalism. I learned how I would literally listen to some of the most iconic interviewers in the world, and I would look at like how they shape questions and the lesson that you're not supposed to ask basically two questions at the same time, and that is a huge no-no in the sport, and I still do it, but that's because I'm not going to fire myself anytime soon. It's kind of my job security that I have here over here at BigMx Radio. But before we dive directly into the Race Tech thing, I need to dial the clocks back even further than we have to this point. You mentioned that you raced a national. you mentioned that you lined up for one, and I don't care if you got dead last, timed qualifying. I don't even think they were doing that at the time, but like last on the grid, like I need that story. I need to know like the sort of the lead up to it, what track it was, what day it was, and a little bit more detail before because you were privateer proven before you were privateer proven.
I not only raced a national, and it wasn't privateer proven. I was on a bone stock, and I mean bone stock Honda CRF 450. I just didn't know any better, and
that's okay. There's plenty of guys still like that now.
But what was crazy is I couldn't ever get in. It was in the days of Saturday qualifiers, and there was really no like qualification system as far as to get into the race. It was like if you sign up for the whole season, you can get in, or your best finish at a race, you can get in. But in the racetracks that are close to me that I actually knew are Redbud and Millville, and they're very popular rounds that everybody wants to ride, and a lot of guys wanted to. So I could never get in for one. And so the one I finally got into was the last ever national held at Troy, Ohio. And I'd never been there before. And I get there, it's hotter than all crap. And we're watching Saturday. We roll out in a truck and trailer, into the back 40 of the privateer pits. And I go, I'm watching amateur day and kind of looking around the track and whatnot. And I don't know if you know much about Troy, Ohio, but it's in the trees and it's real soft, like black dirt, and gets real ruddy.
Yeah.
And so they race amateurs in the morning, and then we go out for our practice on that track. They don't prep it. The only thing they did was they opened up, there was 2 pro sections that they opened up that weren't for the amateurs. And so I hit the track in very first lap of practice. I'm just kind of cruising around, checking it out. And there was like a, 40-foot double before the finish, something small. And I jump it, and I go to lean over like the front of the bike to charge down the straightaway after it. And there's ruts on the landing, and I caught my toe on a rut, and it ripped my foot straight down on the foot peg, first lap of practice. And I tore all the tendons in my ankle. And I let it roll 2 corners in the mechanics area, and I'm like, crap, sit there. The pain kind of goes away a little bit. And I go like roll one more lap of practice and go back to the truck, and then go back, and I'm like, crap, this sucks. I don't want to take my boot off when I get back because I know it's going to swell up. And I made the decision I was going to go out for the second practice, but I couldn't start my bike because it's my right foot and I couldn't kick it. So I literally have my brother's mechanicking for me, start my bike on the line, and I go out for the next practice and just jump everything first lap and just ride pretty decently, actually. But I'm super obviously timid in all my right-hand corners. And they had a cement start. So it was Saturday qualifiers after that. And I lined up for the heat race. And I remember I lined up by Roderick Tane, and he was on a like Motor World Suzuki. And I can't remember
what year is this, by the way.
What's that?
What year is it, by the way?
4 or 5.
Okay.
I had a license in 4 and 5. I don't remember which. I think 2004 is when I actually raced it.
Okay.
Because I don't think I did one in 2005. I'm not positive on that. But it was somebody else pretty legit. And I really didn't start on cement ever. But it was also a really long start, and I was on a 450. And I come out on my day qualifier on Saturday, and I start like 4th. I'm like coming around the second quarter. I'm like, oh crap. I've only ridden like 4 laps, like hard on the track, and I'm just pinning it. And there's just roost and people everywhere. It's just chaos. My heart rate spiked, and I was actually riding really, really well. I think they took 16, and I was like 12th on going on the last lap when I went by the mechanics area. And coming out of one of the pro sections, there was a double that you had to time to get into the inside of a corner, but it was pretty big. And I mistimed it just a little bit and came up short. And at that point, my foot that was already really sore was really, really, really sore. And I couldn't even put it back on the peg, and rolled around the rest of the lap and failed to qualify. And then like that, it was done at that point. There was no lining up for an LCQ or anything. Like I was done, went over, and my very first national, I got to visit the then Asterix medical tent and they did x-rays and stuff and gave me some crutches. And unfortunately, it wasn't a very big success story. I'm glad that I did it. I was always more of an indoor guy than an outdoor guy. So maybe Troy was a perfect track for me to do it at. I actually really liked that track. I thought it was a ton of fun. I just wish I could have walked and and started my bike and stuff. But hey, at least we got there, and at least we did it once. I never raced a supercross. I wish I would have tried it, but I was always a little scared. I practiced on a supercross track a ton. Um, but I liked arena cross because I could learn that small track really fast. I was really good at whoops. I could get through a rhythm fast, but I didn't like to do the big lines. And supercross intimidated me because of having to learn so much track. I put it on a standard that was maybe higher than it really was. But I wish I would have done one just to check that box off as well and said, hey, I did it. I tried it. Um, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change who I am or what I've done. Um, but it would have been cool to have check that box once. Yeah.
Certainly would have been, and what could have been if you would have made it into the main events, or the Sunday races. Perhaps Ricky Carmichael doesn't go perfect in 2005 or 4. Yeah.
Hang on. I believe I was like 6 seconds slower than Ricky Carmichael a lap. Like,
okay. That's actually,
and
that's
I
reasonably
wasn't,
close, because nowadays
yeah,
guys at the back of the pack or guys that don't qualify are like 10 plus seconds adrift. So
yeah. And I always was like, when I went into those situations, I didn't take myself too seriously at all. I just didn't want to be embarrassing, and I wanted to be in the mix. And I was faster than like 20 guys. So it was like, okay, cool. I don't suck completely. My goal for the whole thing wasn't to make the motos. My goal was to make the Sunday show. Like, I was pretty realistic with what expectations I had and where I was at in life. So, yeah, I accomplished that part at least.
So do we want to dive straight into Storm Lake Honda Arena Cross rounds, or just go start focusing on race tech here?
I mean, we can talk about the arena cross stuff. I did okay. I had a lot of fun. I was a junior in high school racing the arena cross series. Like, that was awesome. It was a super sick experience. Um, there was times that I was battling with and beating guys that were like way better than me, I thought, but I was really pretty good at arena cross. Like, um, I got a race with Ryan Sipes in one of his like last, I guess, races before he went pro, and he whole shot. I started second, but again, I was really good in the whoops because I was a big dude and on a 450, and I blew by him in the whoops, and it was like, yeah, this is sick. And then he stuffed me 2 corners later, and I about landed on him on the catapult because he blocked me like right before it. And I was like, oh my God, I just about killed this dude. Like, I have no business battling with him. So that was pretty funny. But I can always say I passed him that one time.
There you go. Like, my only Ryan Sipes story is that we had to share a bed at a hotel room in Colorado, like 2018.
That's random.
Yeah, well, he was staying with James Hansen, and then James was my road friend, where we would go out to eat and drink and everything else like that. So and for that particular weekend, yeah, Sipes had to tag along with us, and there's only 2 beds, so James got the bed to himself, and it was me and Sipes. Don't like, and all I can say about that is Ryan Sipes liked to steal the covers. Well, let's get into some privateer proven discussion. Race Tech, sponsor of the BigMx Radio podcast, new for 2023, and very much thanks to the marketing guy over there for having faith in us. But a brand that has steadily over the years developed a cult-like following because it just plain works. Whether it's the building engines or suspension tuning, or just having your stuff serviced at all, Race Tech has really become sort of a gold standard on a component side of things, as well as a service side of things, because a lot of people think about the gold valves. They've been around for a very long period of time, and they think that they came up with the gold valves years ago, and they've sort of been using those for a long period of time. But a lot of people would be surprised to find out gold valves themselves have evolved over the years, and there's been thousands of renditions of them over the years, and becoming something that's become even more refined over the time that Fall Feed has been working with the company.
Absolutely. I mean, we touched on it a little earlier. The reason I'm at Race Tech is Rob Brown, who's our head of R&D, and the reason I can sell Race Tech and tell my friends to go there, and the reason I went there is I believe in Rob. I've experienced it. I've run a lot of different suspensions under the sun. And I just told you I raced a national on stock stuff. The reason being is I hadn't really spent time with Rob yet. And so I'd pretty much given up on, like, I was like, this stuff most of the time isn't any better than stock. And then I met Rob and he completely transformed my motorcycle. I always thought suspension was just bumps and jumps and whoops. But what I found was an actual really properly set up motorcycle will corner like a mother. It goes where you want it to go. It's predictable. It hooks up. It's very planted feel, great rider feedback, that side of things. And Robin went, like I said, about a year before me, and he completely changed everything about Racetech, from the design of the valve to the valving to the fluid that we used in our mixture of our fluids. Literally from the ground up, Racetech was a completely different product. And it definitely went through a phase where Racetech wasn't the best in the world. It wasn't. And I had to fight that a little bit when I started. There was a really bad reputation, and it was tough for me to give the product away. And that was what Rob and Paul wanted me to do when I started, was get as many people on it as possible. Like, it's okay to give product away, because we have to rebuild this brand and show people that what Racetech is now is not what it was. And since that's happened, Rob has really transformed the company, along with Paul's support and whatnot, to where it is an R&D house constantly. The valve, it constantly updates. You don't get a new part number, and we don't launch, oh, it's a shiny new valve, because we don't wait. We just put it right into production and roll it straight through. There's no waiting. Like, we always want to be leading, and you would be amazed at how many of the bikes out there that you see on the podiums on Saturday nights that Rob has had influence on their setting. And he has very good relationships with all the best tuners in the industry, and they all have respect for each other. And I didn't realize how much that they all talk. It's not a bunch of secrets, at least from our standpoint. And that's something that Rob and Paul both are really good about. And so then they get that reciprocated as well, is, and also a lot of them came through Racetech at one point. Before they were where they are now, they worked at Racetech or were taught Racetech from Paul at some point. So it's neat. And that's where Privateer Proven really came from, was they wanted me to get the product on everybody's bike, as many people as we could. Well, I had all these relationships from my video game days of all the privateers, and so they wanted to support as much as anything. So Rob and Wyatt, or it wasn't Wyatt at the time, whoever's trackside guys were, they were at the test tracks at Motoland, or not Motoland. I'm drawing a blank. It's Milestone. Like,
Milestone, yeah.
They were there 2 to 3 times a week.
Oh, they were there all the
privateers.
time. The times I went down there in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2014, I probably logged at least 10, 15 days at Milestone, and Racetech was there every time.
Absolutely. So, we were giving them support that no one else was going to give them, and when I first started, Rob asked me, he said, put together a budget for a 250 West Supercross team. And I did. And I found even sponsorship to cover all of the expense. It was verbal commitments. And I took it to him and I was like, oh yeah, dude, we're going racing with a race team. This is going to be sick. Rob obviously wanted me to be super involved. And Paul goes, yeah, we're not doing it. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, it's not even going to cost us anything. We're going to get all this marketing, and we're going to be like starting to build what Pro Circuit and Factory Connection both have done. Like, they have these sick race teams. And he's like, I was like, I have it sold already. He's like, what happens when they don't pay their bill? Then I have to. And he's like, I can afford to, but I don't want to. I'm like, get my tail between my legs a little bit, and I'm bummed. And I'm like, well, what can we do differently? And then I was like, what if we do basically what Fly Racing has done? And you just outfit everybody else. If you don't have the top guys, then you just do everybody else. And so I start making phone calls, texts, and at the time it was still difficult to get people to believe in it for year one. Year two, it started getting better. And honestly, I don't hear it much anymore, because it's a whole new generation that's now experienced the good Racetech product. That is, it's world-class stuff. It honestly is competitive at the highest levels. The product is not holding you back anymore. Like, that's 100% not a problem. I mean, we put Vince Freezy on a Supercross podium at one point, like on production stuff. Like that wasn't even A kit stuff. Like we worked with Malcolm Stewart for one day, and he went and won Montreal. There was literally
I was
tried the
there.
stuff one test day and he won. And he liked this stuff. Like he was coming off of a factory program and was happy with it. I like to tell the story of Matt Bisceglia when he went to Hanny's team, and he was testing factory stuff, kit stuff, all the way till the Wednesday before A1 and was struggling. And Robbie, who actually used to be Vince's mechanic, was working for the team and said, you should go talk to Racetech. And it was the first year of the BFRC shock. And everybody said that thing can't work for Supercross. That thing, it can't work. Rob's like, just bring me your production stuff, keep your kit stuff, so that if you don't like it, you have that stuff to go racing on. We'll do your production stuff. And he went out to the Suzuki track and was absolutely ripping. He was actually going faster than Pike, which was pretty gnarly because Bisceglia was not at that level at that time. And the Showa guys were there and the Suzuki engineers were there because it was before A1. And they were blown away that we had the shock working in Supercross. And Matt came off, and he would obviously ridden for Geico and been on some really, really good stuff. He's like, this is the best stuff I've ever ridden. And that was really cool to me to see guys like that have been on the highest level stuff coming and saying, this stuff's really, really, really good. It just reassures me that we're doing something correct and right. And then we're not limited by components. I mean, I don't know if you've heard the story about how terrible WP 4CS forks are.
I have them on my bike.
So we not taking a factory guy, but we took Steven Mages and put him in a Supercross main event on WP 4CS forks. So
I would like that setup, please.
They're still a terrible component. We make them better. But the fact is we're not limited so much by the component because Rob knows how suspension works. Paul knows how suspension works, and they will develop something the best that they can with the component that you have. Could you put a set of cone valve forks on there and have something much better? Absolutely, you still can. I'm not claiming that that WP4CS setup is better than a set of cone valve stuff or factory stuff. But the fact is it was good enough to put a privateer in a Supercross main event when most other people were saying, just throw them in the trash.
Fair enough. Well, honestly, I have always struggled with that fork. I do not trust my front wheel. I also don't trust myself at the controls. But yeah, that bike is honestly like what's the worst part about that fork to me, or just the way that the 2016 KTM 250 two-stroke feels to me is that every time that I jump on my 2005 KX 252 stroke, which is notoriously one of the most ill-handling KX 250s that was ever produced, I feel more at home on that bike and more capable and just more like I feel better on that bike. And yeah, it just it bugs me so much that a bike that is 11 years older and probably has more time on that fork than I do on the KTM. That 4CS fork is it needs race tech, and I'm glad that we've made bridge this relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting because if I look at it from a business standpoint, I actually miss 4CS forks, and people look at it like, why would you miss 4CX forks? They suck. The word we used to use for them is they were consistently inconsistent. Just very, very unpredictable. But what a lot of people don't realize is what's different about Racetech than any other suspension company out there pretty much is what we do through our shop. We look at it as marketing and R&D. That's not actually our business where we make our money. Our money that we make is based on selling setups and products and such to all the other suspension tuners out there. Well, the only way you can actually make a WP4CS fork work is you convert it to an open chamber fork and get rid of their 4-chamber design. And then we add like compression bases, and there's a bunch of parts and pieces that even tuners that aren't using gold valves buy from us. And people that you would think are our quote competitors will purchase from us. In the warehouse in the back of the shop is actually what the business is all about with Racetech. And that's why we don't have to have secrets. We can give them away. We can teach people to become quote our competition and be tuners because we have products and tools and settings and all of that side of things to provide for them. So the WP4CS fork was actually amazing for business because they were so bad, and we really were the ones that figured out how to make the thing work. And it took a lot of parts and components to make it work. So that meant we had a lot of stuff to sell. And when you have a lot of stuff to sell, then it's pretty good for the business.
There you go. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, say I've clearly I need my suspension done by Race Tech, and we look to coordinate that before the season starts for me in early May. But what are some of the questions that customers should be asking their Race Tech authorized dealer when it comes to setting up their bike or getting some sort of service done?
They should probably be asking them what they recommend and listening to that. Um, if you're going to somebody to do your suspension, you should have already done your research and known that, well, this guy knows what he's doing. So don't. One of the questions I get asked a lot that makes me just smack my forehead is, if you see it on the amateur national side a lot, is, well, will you go test with me? And I look at him and I go, so you want me to suck at my job? And they're like, huh? And I go, well, if you're asking me for testing already, that means you expect it to suck and it need to be better. I was like, I thought you were paying me to make your stuff good so that hopefully we don't have to test. We test when we have to test to make it better, but that one always drives me absolutely nuts. But if it's like, take it to somebody that you actually trust, and you start there. I mean, you can log on to racetech.com and find your local service center. If they're a service center, it means that they've went through the course with Racetech and know how to install suspension. It also means that they have over $1 million in R&D at their disposal, because that's what the Racetech R&D budget is annually. And there's no secrets when it comes to our Racetech centers. They have access to the same exact settings and products that you can get in California. And then they can be at the local track, so they can set your sag. They can make sure that your front wheels actually put on properly and your forks are parallel. Because let me tell you, I hear a lot of people say my suspension sucks, and that's the problem. It's not that the suspension has anything wrong with it. It's the fact they didn't put their front wheel on properly and the forks are bound, so it's sticking and harsh. It's so common. I mean, we see it in Supercross all the time. Wyatt walks around in the morning and just loosens everyone's axle, just make sure their forks are parallel, because they're always switching tires and wheels, at every round. And
Triple clamps are cross-threaded and tight.
And they don't have the most experienced mechanics a lot of times. It's my buddy flew out and he's helping me. So you can solve a lot of problems by just doing that, and then actually setting your sag and the other thing is be honest. The worst thing you can do is not be truthful. With your weight and speed is very important to get the right setup. And that's where you can communicate the most with your tuner, is if they haven't seen you ride, make sure that you both are on the same page of the skill level that you actually are for the setting that you have. And I mean, I could tell you there's a couple of Supercross riders that they have the weight that they tell us, which is their very feminine weight, and then there's their real weight. And let me tell you that this part is, the guys can tell right away when they go to set sag whether you told them the truth on your weight or not, because they have a formula that sets that with preload and spring rate calculated for rider weight. So if you didn't tell them the right weight and you're not getting sag, well, then it means you lied about your weight or you were just wrong. So there's a reason that all of our trucks that go to the track have a scale in them. So it's very common. I've gone out with guys and it's, come here, stand on the scale. That's why. So there's one currently racing right now that he was about 30 pounds estimate of where he actually was versus what he was. And when he went to get his first bike, his first setup, he's like, man, this thing's real low in the back. And they were setting sag. Luckily the bike was at the shop, and they're like, yeah, hang on a minute. And brought the scale over.
30 pounds. I don't think I've ever been off by 30 pounds. I gotta be a little bit realistic with myself. Honestly, it was the same thing when I used to set up skis for people. Like the DIN settings on your ski bindings are based on your ability and your weight. Is that if you're really heavy but you're a bad skier, you still need a stiffer spring rate on the DIN settings than you are. Or if you're, say, like a really light skier but you're really really good, you'd also need a really stiff spring rate, because you're going to put that much torsion on the bindings themselves. And you'd have people like lie about their weight or their ability. It was always their ability. They're like, oh yeah, I ski like blacks all the time, and then they end up breaking their femur because their ski wasn't supposed to come off, or was supposed to come off and it didn't. But yeah, I totally get you on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's only just doing yourself a favor by giving them the most proper information. And the fact is when we build a setup, we build it at the top end of your skill level. And what I mean by that is Rob has a theory of you get in trouble, that's when your suspension is supposed to save you. And when you get in trouble is usually when you're pushing the limits and riding at the high end of your skill level. So the goal is to gradually work you up to being a better rider and going to that next skill level up. But you won't have enough comfort to even get to that level if you don't actually start in the right spot.
Fair enough. And yeah, that's totally fair. And sometimes people really like riders, they don't truly understand what their suspension is giving them as far as feedback. Like I thought for the longest time that when my bike was like always wanting to sort of climb out of ruts, that I like, oh, like it's too soft, it's too soft, it's too soft. I'm like, no, it's probably too stiff because the front wheel isn't tracking. It's pushing through and wanting to like climb out of ruts. And yeah, it was like I've worked with some guys in the past, and we have Chris, I believe it's Chris Elliott, who doesn't live too far from here, who is a unauthorized race tech dealer, and that's who I'm going to be working with going forward to set my bike up so that I can try and back up my plus 25B championship here in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like so many things that are common, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And the worst thing for me to hear is, well, I read on the forums about this. And it's like, okay, well, you're talking to a suspension professional. Do you want to take the 10-year-old on the forum, or do you want the suspension professional's opinion? Like, you can take it or leave it. But I mean, when it goes to making changes, you listen to them. I mean, there's a lot of common theories out there that are just completely wrong. You could make, Paul always jokes about, he's like, you can make a living on just going and speeding people's rebound up, because as soon as their back end kicks, the first thing they do is go crank the rebound in, because they don't understand how it works, and that most likely they're making the problem worse. Because if you the way that I explain it to people is, take your bike off the stand in your garage, push down as absolute hard as you can on your shock, and let go. Does your back wheel come off the ground? That is the absolute hardest that shock could ever rebound, is that. And it's not kicking the back end off the ground. So how are you telling me that that's kicking your back wheel up in the air? It is not actually your rebound causing your bike to kick. There's another issue there. Another one is people with their fork height, and, well, I want it to turn better. And so they've dropped their forks and their clamps so that they're, lowering the front end, per se. And they say, oh, it turns so much better. No, actually your bars turn easier in your hands, but you just gave up front wheel traction and your bike actually doesn't turn as well. So that's something that's also super common, but it's stuff like that. So instead of guessing or listening to the guy on the forum, I would recommend talking to an actual suspension professional and letting them help you and steer you through what's going on. And that's where a lot of the Race Tech Center thing comes into play. Is it's really tough for Race Tech to have 10,000 customers and help all of them. But when I have a Race Tech Center, they have 100 customers or so, whatever that number is, a much smaller number, and they can provide much better support and be there for you to answer all the questions like that.
Fair enough. Like they might ask something like, how often should I have my suspension serviced, let alone having it completely revalved? Of course, everyone thinks that they're a factory superstar. They need a complete revalve, and they also need testing. Everyone wants to be like that, feel like they're Ricky Carmichael, and have someone go out there with a flathead screwdriver and twist back and forth, and they're gonna magically drop lap times. But that is one question I had for you. Is like, say, even for myself, Mr. Weekend Warrior, I practice maybe once, twice a week, and I race on weekends. How frequently do you think that I'm getting my stuff torn apart and at least freshened up?
We're 20 to 30 hours is what we recommend on a rebuild. And really it's for two reasons. One, your damping characteristics start to change as fluid breaks down. And so your stuff's not as consistent at that point. It's not actually providing the damping that's designed for. And then also it is to keep your parts from getting additional wear and tear, which starts to get really expensive when you start to blow through coatings and stuff like that, because fluid's worn and you're getting more friction and whatnot. you're not only not getting the performance, but then you start to get into really expensive repairs and that side of things that you can avoid. So yeah, we're 20 to 30 hours is what we recommend. And that's for really, people say, oh, well, I'm only this level rider. Your suspension's still moving. Like that's the thing is, no matter what level rider you are, it's still moving. And I understand like not everyone wants to get a revalve, but so I always tell people at least get it in proper working order, and then do yourself a favor, and spring rates are super, super important. And they'll at least set the balance of the bike properly. And so do that. Like you don't, yes, a revalve will help everybody because it's a personalized setup for you. And from an OEM standpoint, you never get that exact personalized setup for you. So a proper revalve should be better, but at least do yourself a favor and get the geometry of the bike set up right so you can get sag properly and the thing's at least riding decent and fresh and not causing additional damage. But yeah, people overlook suspension very, 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 very often.
Oh, heck yeah. When it comes to like upgrading my motorcycle, I will dump money into suspension long before I look into any engine mod or anything quite like that. But that's also something that Race Tech does as well. You guys do Race Tech engines, and like you guys do the engines for Team Solitaire, and those guys have been getting good starts all year.
Yeah, that program is really awesome. And I tell people all the time, and I talk about Rob and how great he is at suspension. Well, what a lot of people maybe don't know is he's actually better at engines. He became a suspension guy because his engine customers wanted him to be one. Um, and when he moved to California to go to Race Tech, he sold off all of his engine equipment that he had. And it happened to be probably 4 or 5 years later, the guy that had bought it all decided he was going to get out of the industry. And so all the equipment was going up for sale, and it was going up for sale at about pennies on the dollar. And Rob called Paul and was like, hey, what do you think about starting an engine department? And Paul's, he told him about the equipment, and Paul said, well, if anything, it's a good investment because I can turn around and resell the equipment later if I want to and make money. And they bought it. And then Rob's like, I don't want to run it at all. Like, he's like, we need to find somebody. And just like we were talking about earlier with finding the right person and then teaching them, the stuff sat for nearly 2 years until Andrew, who now runs our engine department, came along and became available, and he was the guy. And so then he came in and he had some experience, but he then learned everything that he could from Rob, and Rob taught him everything. And then Rob took him to the people that taught him engines, which are some of the best induction people in the world. In fact, Darren Morgan, I believe is his name, is right now known as the absolute best induction person in the world, and does a lot of NHRA stuff. And that is who previously had taught Rob, and he actually sent Andrew to spend some time with him and learn from him. And just like suspension, we're not people that are going out there and just throwing a bunch of stuff at it, grinding away, and then throwing it on the dyno and throwing it on the track and saying, oh, did it make power? It's a mathematic formula, and it's a scientific approach to it. So then it's repeatable and can be applied across all models and that side of things. I mean, Andrew spends a ridiculous amount of time on the flow bench and developing and developing and developing. And I mean, I would challenge anyone in our industry against Andrew right now for how smart he is and what he knows. He is incredible. And it's an interesting department because we don't build engines in-house. We are a machine shop that supplies engine services to engine builders everywhere, or just yourself, and we'll tell you what we've found. Like, this is the combination to create power for that bike, and you assemble it how you want to. If you listen, you can have a really, really, really good running motorcycle. I know plenty of people that are extremely happy with them. It's gotten to the point now where some of the most renowned engine builders in the industry, guys that have a long history of making a ton of horsepower, are utilizing our engine services department. They don't tell you that it's been there. They don't put our logo on their stuff, and I'm not allowed to tell you about it more than that. I can't mention names. And there's factory teams and OEMs doing the same exact thing, and that's just growing. I mean, the department is absolutely insanely busy. The amount of equipment and dollars in equipment that we've been able to get is awesome. And here's the thing, not every single builder can afford to have all of that stuff, but because we service so many builders, we are able to. Plus, obviously, the suspension side of things, we had a little bit of a bankroll. So it's not just the people, it's also the proper equipment. And so it's really neat. It's a really cool department. You can gain a lot from we know we do ECU stuff all the time, and you can get a great flowing head. I mean, I can tell you this much: the bikes that the AJE guys are on, getting great starts. Mitchell Harrison absolutely is raving about his motorcycle, how fast it is right now, which is awesome. That Jerry Robin pulled whole shots at nationals on as a privateer. That engine package is a head, a piston, an ECU, and race gas. A retail cost on that engine is somewhere under $3,000, probably about $2,200, $2,300, which I'm doing math off the top of my head. I don't do a lot of pricing, but comparatively to, I mean, I hear engine packages from $10,000 to $20,000 out there all the time, and that have 5-hour rebuild periods. That engine also will run the entire Supercross season without having to be opened back up. And the reason
That's
for that
big.
is,
That's important.
and the reason for that is everything, again, is it's not just, hey, we're testing and tuning and trying this. We do that. We do, a lot of that's mapping, especially, but it's because we're creating an efficient head to start with and putting the power where it's supposed to be, and not just, a lot of our industry isn't built on technology. It's built on trial and error. And well, he's been around a long time, and, he was a mechanic for 18 years working on bikes, so he must know what he's doing. Well, he might know how to put stuff together, but there's more to it than that side of things. So, we're able to make a lot of power for a little. And I'm also not here claiming that it's a star Yamaha, because here's the thing: they're not just creating a good engine, they're dissecting every single piece of an engine and a motorcycle to maximize power and handling and that side of things. We are in the business of building a great head, providing parts that are needed for reliability and that side of things. But it's not, we're not necessarily saying, oh, we, do this to your airbox and that side of things. Like, if we come across it, we will let you know about it and tell you about it. But that's not stuff that we're spending hours and hours and hours upon developing. That's not our business. We want to stay in our lane a little bit, I guess you could say.
Fair enough. Well, I do appreciate the info, and that's pretty eye-opening to see Race Tech being able to compete with the big dogs, and doing so in a budget-conscious fashion. I know you're super proud of your Race Tech athletes that show out at the top, the peak of the sport. I think of probably the most demanding side of things would definitely be, in my own eyes, would be racing outdoor nationals in the States. Like, a lot of people, obviously Supercross is a huge piece of as far as us watching, but those who actually purchase suspension, I would say the majority of them race outdoors, and then they would be looking for an outdoor setting. Give me an example of somebody who really takes their Race Tech suspension at the pro level and takes it to the highest height it can.
Well, when it comes to outdoors, a lot of our, I guess you would say, premier athletes, since we're working with privateers, a lot of them don't ride the nationals, or they don't ride all of them, because as a business decision, it's really a terrible idea for most of them. So we actually focus a lot of our support on the outdoor side on your top local racers. And we want the guy winning at the local track that he'll also show up and race his local, couple nationals or so that are in his area a lot of times. But we don't necessarily overlook the guy that is out at Chicken Licks Raceway every Saturday or Sunday winning the local A class. I think a lot of times those guys get overlooked, and a lot of times they're making more money than the privateer trying to chase the nationals. As far as the guy that really captures the flag and believes in the product and takes it to highest levels, I mean, it'd be pretty hard to look further than Chris Bloss, who, I mean, he's been a long time loyal Race Tech guy. He's run Race Tech inside of a lot of different sets of suspension that maybe didn't have our stickers on it, even just as a big believer in the product. And he believed in it so much that he made it his business after racing, until Well, he got a top secret phone call and decided to go back racing, which um, I'm super happy about the fact that our relationship's so good that it was one of the first phone calls that he made was to tell Rob how pumped he was that he finally got his opportunity on a factory bike. And he was
Hell
coming off
yeah.
the couch for it. And I mean, I'm a huge believer in Chris, and as a person and as a human being, I think he's a great racer. And I'm stoked that he at least gets the opportunity, because one of the things he's always told me was, I just want to know what it's like. I want to feel a factory bike at some point, just so I know. He's like, I know my stuff's always been really good, but how much better actually is it? What have I been racing against my whole career? So I'm super excited to hear more about that as he gets going and racing on the East Coast. And I mean, it's going to hurt his suspension business a little bit, which is a bummer. He had a really, really good first first year of becoming a race tech center. Impressive actually, but I guess I shouldn't be that impressed because he's one of those guys that's driven and motivated, has a great local following and that side of things. But I don't know. I'm wondering, is he riding for Pro Circuit Cowie on the weekends, training and testing and everything, and still going in the shop at night and building suspension or not? I'm not sure how that's all going to work out for him.
Yeah, that was actually something that was a shower thought that I had either yesterday or the day after or the day before, of just like, how is Chris Blows managing that? Like, does he have some minions back home that are trained to be able to handle some of his work, or is he having to say, hey, got to put you on hold? Because like up here, it'd be a little bit different. If you're a race tech, like you'd probably do some snowmobile stuff and like maybe some snow bike stuff. But for right now, it's not all that busy. Although I'm sure about 2 weeks prior to the season starting, there's about 250 people that say they need their stuff done. And that's the same woes that graphic company owners feel when the race is this weekend and you get a call on Thursday about they want a full custom kit. But I just think that it's so awesome to see Chris Blows, a journeyman in the sport, a guy who has ridden for so many different manufacturers, so many different teams, been loyal to so many different companies over the years, and he's such a great guy, someone you can like, just your average fan can really connect with and cheer for. I've had him on the show before, and I think after a couple of races out east, I'm gonna have him on again to do a little bit of a deep dive into not only his career, but how that Pro Circuit Kawasaki compares to a bike that he'd build and spring for himself.
Yeah, it's definitely a really neat story. So hopefully he's just telling everybody to either wait or ship your stuff off to Racetech's headquarters for a little while, so that he can make the most of this opportunity and not focus on running a business while trying to also be a factory level racer. So I mean, I hope that's what he's doing, but I haven't actually asked him yet. It'll be interesting to see what he's actually doing.
We'll get to the bottom of that soon. You and I, in just over 12 hours, are going to do this again. 14 hours from now, we're going to be YouTube live with the great Denny Stevenson. We were supposed to be doing this with him tonight, but scheduling and Denny are sometimes hit or miss. And I think that's something that we will, I'm learning. But this is damn near 2 hours, Chris. This was so much fun to sort of like literally like a lazy river, just meandering through your history within the sport. And honestly, I think we just kind of scratched the surface. And that's one of the real reasons why I wanted to have you on. And this will be a kind of a continual thing where we sort of jump on and talk about some stuff. But I hope that people were educated, informed, and entertained by your story with the sport, because it's a good one and a great one.
Well, it's pretty crazy to think that people would be interested and care about it, but I'm always excited to talk about dirt bikes at any time. And I really want to encourage anyone that is interested in race tech or has questions about it and stuff. Like, I'm just a normal super fan like anyone else. Like, don't be afraid to reach out. You can follow me on any of my socials at checkers448. My email is chris@racetech.com, and I have no problem trying to help people out, answer questions, steer you in the right direction, and really provide, that personalized support, because that's what the moto industry is all about for me. I go trackside at Loretta's, and it brings back memories. Speaking of Pro Circuit, I was a Pro Circuit kid on exhaust as a kid growing up, and I'd go over there at Loretta's, and they would give me hats and shirts, and like, come by and we'll check your sag, and they just treated me like I was really awesome, even though I was going to go get 30th place. So I try to take that and provide that same experience for people as much as I possibly can. And if we're talking about dirt bikes, it's awesome for me. And like, it's my job, but if you haven't gathered through this whole thing, most of it really doesn't feel like work. I really enjoy what I do, and enjoying dealing and helping people is what makes it so fun for me. So definitely feel free to reach out. Thanks for the time, Brad. Remember, mention BigMx Radio if you are going to call or email in an order for Race Tech, and you'll get a nice little discount there. Also lets people know that you're hearing about Race Tech from BigMx Radio, so that maybe I can keep Brad around, I guess, for next year.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. I believe this is the 6th podcast that I've been on this week, and we're doing one more tomorrow. So yeah, like it hasn't felt like work at all this week, and nor has it for the 9 years prior to this. So we'll keep it rolling. Really appreciate you coming on, making the time, and we'll definitely chat again soon.
Absolutely. Keep the